Howdy folks, welcome back to Kdog'S Movies, and this time around we're going to take a look at a trilogy of films. And this was not just an ordinary trilogy, this was a documentary. A trilogy of documentaries produced by a legendary studio, and this was done at a time to commemorate several things that were taking place. It was the 50th anniversary of this particular film studio, and it was also to commemorate the memories that happened of those films, those classic films. Well, who was the studio? It was none other than MGM themselves. So in 1974, they decided to, the head of production, Daniel Melnick, decided to collaborate with director Jack Haley Jr. and a team of directors, not directors, but editors, by the name of Bud Friedgen, I hope I'm pronouncing that name, and Michael J. Sheridan. They decided to put together some of the best moments from MGM's history. And not only that, it was to gather several of the surviving stars back onto the lot for the first time in many, many years to reminisce and share these memories with the audience. Not only that, it was a time, it was also a disappointing time because this was the early 1970s, okay? Studios were getting desperate. And so New Hollywood was in full swing, but the consensus was to go for smaller intimate pieces. And so that's why, you look at the early 70s, it was more performance driven rather than big spectacle. And this film, actually this trilogy of films, was to commemorate the studio and its 50th anniversary, as well as the sheer product and spectacle that the studio turned out. It was from 1974. We have That's Entertainment. Yeah, this first one was released in 1974, directed by Jack Haley Jr., executive producer Daniel Melnick, and you'll see several guest stars including Gene Kelly, Bing Crosby, Liza Minnelli, Donald O'Connor, Debbie Reynolds, Mickey Rooney, Frank Sinatra, James Stewart, and Elizabeth Taylor. So sit back, relax, and enjoy what was, and just out of pure nostalgic of the MGM musical, That's Entertainment. When That's Entertainment debuted in 1974, first of all, it was a little bit bittersweet because it was the end of an era, definitely, of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studio, because at the time of filming, and as you can see in the film, the backlot was pretty run down. And also, once the completion was filming of the interstitial moments with the introductory segments with the cast, once filming of that was complete, the studio sold the backlot mostly to real estate developers. And matter of fact, as soon as filming wrapped, bulldozers showed up onto the sound stages and started tearing down what was the remains of it. It was later, the other portions of the studio were sold to another studio, which would be Lorimar, and shows like Family Matters, Full House, and TV shows of that nature, which were produced by Lorimar Television. It was kind of, they were kind of like, you realize that the set of Full House was built where The Wizard of Oz was filmed. So, so there was little moments like that. But also when the film premiered in 1974, in proper significance, MGM decided to throw a 1,000 watt, what they called a 1,000 watt premiere. So with a huge star-studded premiere, and just like in the old days of the golden era of the MGM musicals, as soon as the film was completed after its showing, they would walk across the street to the nearby hotel and have this huge gala party to celebrate the film's release. And in traditional fashion, it boasts of what MGM used to say: it had more stars than there are in heaven. And still, as many stars as they could showed up to the premiere. The film was a very successful film, ended up being one of the most profitable films of 1974, garnering about $20 million worldwide, and which was a big number back then. So, based on a $3 million budget. So, this was easy profit for MGM. So, now we fast forward 2 years later. Like any successful Hollywood production, they demand a sequel. And so in 1976, here comes Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly to host That's Entertainment Part 2. Yeah, and this one was actually directed by Gene Kelly, furthering the greatest moments in the history of MGM. So, strap in. Here's part 2 of That's Entertainment. That's Entertainment Part 2. This one, again, directed by Gene Kelly, released by MGM in 1976. That's Entertainment Part 2. So That's Entertainment Part 2, which came out 2 years later after the original That's Entertainment. Now, you may notice some big differences between That's Entertainment and That's Entertainment Part 2. Well, when it came time to make That's Entertainment Part 2, the direction had fallen into the hands of Gene Kelly. And he decided to bring on a friend and collaborator, Fred Astaire, to co-host the film with him, along with these segments of the great film clips from MGM's library at the time. But they decided to take a different approach than what had occurred in the first film. If you noticed in the first film that That's Entertainment Part 1 was to commemorate the studio and all the memorable moments that came from that studio. Well, and they did it just before the actual MGM studio was to be bulldozed over for real estate. That's Entertainment Part 2 was actually to give fans what they wanted and say, hey, we want to see more of this stuff. And so Gene Kelly was given the task of filming new segments with him and Fred Astaire, hosting the interstitial moments and in segments. But also, the film didn't just focus on the musicals. There's some great musical pieces that they highlight in this film, but also they focus more on the studio's other product as well, such as Gone with the Wind. And comedy, a lot of the comedy films that came out, Laurel and Hardy, Red Skelton, and a lot of times that comedy was intermingled with the musical. So, like a year ago, I reviewed a film that had Esther Williams in it, and it also had Red Skelton. And what was the name of that film? Neptune's Daughter. If you recall, if you go in my videos and look back when I reviewed Neptune's Daughter for you, it was a mixture of the comedy and the musical. Esther Williams, you know, she was known for her singing, and or, no, I'm sorry, not her singing, but her swimming, and then there was some big musical numbers in there, as well as you had Red Skelton with what was going on with his love triangle. So it was really quite comedic and interspersed with the musical. Another example is Singing in the Rain. One of the most famous numbers in that was Donald O'Connor's Make 'Em Laugh. And so this film took a different approach and talked about not just the studio, but the great films that they made of comedy, drama, musical, and so on and so forth. The historical film, you know, the historical epics that would depict, and how sometimes they would intermingle all that stuff together. Now, when That's Entertainment Part 2 was released to theaters, and this is in typical sequel form, the sequel doesn't always do as well as the first film. That was the case with That's Entertainment Part 2, but however, it was enough to pack theaters when it did play. Just did not generate enough revenue to either match or topple the first film. It would be another 18 years before we would see That's Entertainment Part 3. That's coming up next. I'm going to take a little break, but I'll be back just in a little bit. So don't go anywhere. It'll just transition. So yeah, I'm going to take a little break because I went back to back with these things. So yeah, we'll be back after this. Alright, welcome back. I know it's the next day, but and of course I got my laundry going, so that's what you hear in the background. So you know, what better time than to watch a film? So but we are going to continue on with the final installment. This will be the last of this video. The final installment of this trilogy. In 1994, Ted Turner, by this time, had acquired the MGM library. So, and he had all the rights to all the MGM films from 1985 to its conception. And so, as well as Warner Brothers pre-1950 and a majority of the RKO films. So, and that's why if you were lucky enough to have TNT or TBS part of your cable system, you got to see play on occasional television at MGM or Warner Brothers Classics. So, but in 1994, Ted Turner had decided, you know, it's the 70th anniversary of the MGM studio. He briefly owned MGM in the 1980s, but then turned around and sold it right back. But he still maintained the library. So in 1994, knowing that with the successes of That's Entertainment and That's Entertainment Part 2, they thought it would be a good idea to do That's Entertainment 3. Now, the thing with this film is that it only had a limited engagement at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York, and still brought a tremendous amount of box office to the area or to that theater, and it was just a limited run release. By this time, the box office had completely changed, and so at the time that That's Entertainment 1 and That's Entertainment Part 2 was made, the studio was kind of in dire straits and needed some quick cash. So by this time, everything was financially sound, and of course, movies had changed. You with the help of, when they changed things in the 70s from, movies like Star Wars and Jurassic Park and all this Close Encounters and all these movies that kind of changed the cinema and brought box office back. So there was no necessarily a need for That's Entertainment 3 at the time. But in 1994, some new developments had occurred. It's the 70th anniversary, or was the 70th anniversary of MGM. And so Turner Entertainment thought it would be a good idea to do That's Entertainment 3 in conjunction with MGM. And not only that, there had been a new advent in cinema-going technology, which was digital surround sound. And this movie was mixed, taking elements from the original source material and making a digital soundtrack. So, the film was released in Dolby Stereo and DTS. However, the version that's on the DVD version is only in Dolby Digital. So, the Blu-ray version may be in DTS, but I'm not entirely sure. But the version I have is on DVD. And of course in a 5.1 mix. Now, and of course when this came out, it got a ton of praise from film critics and was released nationwide on home video and Laserdisc. So, grab your popcorn and enjoy That's Entertainment 3, released in 1994 by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in association with Turner Entertainment. So, here we go. Let's roll film. So, That's Entertainment 3. And to be honest, I think that this is one of the more interesting entries in this trilogy, because not only did it highlight several clips from MGM's great musicals, but also it took a look behind the scenes on several things that went on. For example, there was a scene that involved Eleanor Powell in a film that she was in, showcasing her dance steps, how the camera kept coming closer to her while the stage was pretty big. And they show side by side in a split screen form. What they had to do is they had to have a fork truck that would come in, pull the stage apart whenever she moved to that further back section, so the camera could move in further, and then then pull that part of the stage away. And so it was that was interesting to see. And also it also took a look at some of movie making politics that was going on at the time. And of course, there's been the old saying, sex sells. And because of that, there were several scenes, several films that were deemed at the time too risque or inappropriate. So that's when the Breen office decided to put in place censorship practices to so-called protect the integrity of the motion picture industry for decent pictures and so on and so forth. They would later, of course, abolish this, and now we have the rating system, which is G, PG, R, and NC-17. And of course, PG-13 is in there too. But yeah, this one peeled didn't just commemorate the musicals, but also it showed how a lot of the stuff was done in Hollywood's Dream Factory, which was MGM's title, what they like to call themselves, or one of the names they like to call themselves was Hollywood's Dream Factory. And so they wanted to peel back and show what happened. Also, they wanted to show alternate versions of certain scenes. Like there was a number that was in a film with Joan Crawford called Two-Faced Woman. It originally was supposed to be in another film. That song was supposed to be in another film starring Sid Charisse, I believe. But it was cut from the Sid Charisse film and put into the Joan Crawford film. The song was called Two-Faced Woman. Also, they showed several instances where Judy Garland had numbers either cut or she was replaced. Originally, Judy Garland was supposed to be in the film Annie Get Your Gun, but unfortunately, Judy Garland was having mental breakdown at the time, and she left the picture and was replaced by Betty Hutton. She was replaced by Betty Hutton. But originally that part was supposed to go to Judy Garland, and also there were some numbers cut from what Judy had done and what Betty Hutton had done. As well as there was a number that was cut from Easter Parade. That the number was replaced, but the costume, which was Judy Garland's trademark top hat and tuxedo jacket, that was supposed to be an Easter Parade with the monogamy song, whatever it was called. Monotony song. And the song was replaced, but they later recycled that outfit and that costume for another film that Judy was famous for. You know, the shout hallelujah, come on, get happy, that number. So it was interesting to see how this film really took a glamorous look at behind the scenes and some of the things that changed throughout movie making, and you know, what was originally going to be in a film was later cut out or it was altered. And so, and it wasn't just Judy Garland, there was Lena Horne. She had a number that was completely cut because it was deemed too racy for a young African American woman, a young black woman, to be singing in a bubble bath. It was too risque to have a young woman's to actually have a woman singing in the bubble bath altogether. And yeah, and so that song was cut from that film, and originally Lena Horne was supposed to be in Showboat, but she was replaced. She was supposed to be the main character in Showboat, but Lena was replaced because at the time the censorship boards did not approve of interracial relations. So I think we made some progress here over the years in terms of now movies are no longer censored. Now they are self-policed. They are regulated and self-policed in order to gain a audience. Like if you want a family-friendly picture, you can't have a bunch of profanity or sex or anything like that in a film. It has to be family-friendly. I mean, and that's why we have a rating system now instead of a censorship board that's what was going on back in those days. But still, they managed to put out some great movies and some great product, even with the pressure of a censorship board. And just this is probably, again, one of my favorite ones of the of this trilogy, because it went back to the formula that worked best for the first film, which was the interstitial. The interstitial segments were hosted by the legendary stars themselves. Because you had Sid Charisse, Lena Horne, Howard Keel, June Allison, Ann Miller, Debbie Reynolds, Mickey Rooney, and Esther Williams, all appearing on screen as their older selves, reminiscing on the work that they put in for those films. This also was the last on-screen appearance in front of a camera of Gene Kelly. It was the last thing he ever did in front of a camera, is filming his interstitials introductions for That's Entertainment 3. And of course he directed That's Entertainment Part 2. On this DVD, Robert Osborne, who was the host of Turner Classic Movies at the time, he stated that he was on the set when they filmed the sequences, filmed Gene Kelly's interstitial dialogue. And Gene was not in the best of health that day. But he was a professional and a trooper, and toughed it out and kept going, even take after take after take. Now, what's interesting about, also another thing interesting about this film, is that this one was directed by the previous two films' editors. Bud Fredigan and Michael Sheridan were the directors of That's Entertainment 3, and they served as the editors of the previous two entries in the series. So they knew what they were doing and what they were making. They produced, directed, and edited this new one. So it's this is quite, if you can find this, it's kind of hard to find. I was lucky enough to find all three of them through a various used video store outlets. But they are these are quite interesting to take a look at. Even though there's another documentary that was made, and it was produced for television. And I think the only way that you can find that is, there was a version of The Wizard of Oz. If you can maybe find on eBay a DVD copy of the documentary When the Lion Roars, which was a mini-series length documentary hosted by Patrick Stewart, and it was produced for TNT television. So it did not go to that one did not go to the movie theaters, but it aired on television for TNT, because Ted Turner owns the rights to, well, I shouldn't say Ted Turner, but Turner Entertainment owns the rights to the MGM library. They also own the rights to pre-1950s Warner Brothers and most of the RKO library. So that's why Turner Entertainment was involved with the third installment to That's Entertainment 3, because not only did he own the previous two films, but he also owns the contents that is featured in all three of those films. So they have the entire MGM library, and now that's all under Warner Brothers. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I do encourage everyone, check the That's Entertainment trilogy out. And so we'll be back next time for more movies and more discussion. So from me to you, see you later.